Welcome to True Echo, where real emotions meet unforgettable stories. Tonight's tale is one that will stay with you long after the final word. It's a story about fate, love, and the power of one simple act of kindness on the coldest night of the year. One woman's courage to speak changed a man's life forever. This is not just a holiday love story, it's a powerful journey through class, prejudice, and the unbreakable bond between two hearts who found each other when the world told them they shouldn't. The city of New York was dressed in its best, twinkling lights shimmered on every corner, shop windows glowed with festive decorations, and carolers' voices filled the air with cheer. But not all hearts were warmed by the season. Daniel Harrison sat alone on a snow-dusted park bench in Central Park. Clad in a $1,000 overcoat and handmade leather shoes, he was the picture of success. CEO of one of the most influential tech firms on the East Coast, his name was known in boardrooms and business columns alike. Yet, on Christmas Eve, Daniel sat with his collar turned against the wind, feeling more like a ghost than a man. To the world, he had it all: wealth, power, the perfect pedigree. But within him lived a gnawing hollowness. The holidays were a cruel mirror. They reflected everything he didn't have: love, belonging, and someone to call home. The distant sound of church bells echoed across the empty park, announcing the arrival of Christmas Day. Daniel sighed, running his gloved hands together for warmth. He'd walked out of his family's annual gala hours earlier, a parade of wealthy elites sipping champagne and speaking in sterile tones about profits and real estate. No one noticed his absence. No one ever did. And that's when he heard it. "Would you like to have dinner with me?" The voice was soft. Unexpected. Real. Daniel turned and saw her. A young black woman stood just a few feet away, bundled in a worn but clean winter coat, a knit scarf wrapped neatly around her neck. Her curls framed her face like a halo of warmth in the freezing night. Her eyes weren't curious or flirtatious. They were kind. "I'm sorry," he asked, not quite trusting his own ears. "I saw you sitting here." "Alone," she said. "It's Christmas. No one should eat dinner alone tonight." Daniel blinked. In his world, offers came with strings, deals came with conditions. But there was none of that in her tone. I don't even know your name," he replied. She smiled. "Maya. Maya Mitchell. I'm a kindergarten teacher." Daniel paused, the title catching him off guard. "You're serious?" Maya laughed softly, and it wasn't mocking. "Dead serious. I made a big meal. And I hate wasting food. So, would you?" For a long beat, Daniel just stared at her. At her quiet strength. At her unapologetic presence. At the woman who stood with the dignity of someone who knew her worth, despite not having status, or titles, or wealth. He found himself standing. "Thank you. Yes. I'd love to." Maya's apartment sat on the edge of a quiet Brooklyn street, nestled above a small bookstore that had long since closed for the night. It was modest, with peeling window frames and a narrow stairwell that creaked beneath each step, but inside, it glowed like a secret sanctuary. As Daniel stepped through the threshold, the warmth struck him immediately. Not just from the heating or the glow of the fairy lights strung along the walls, but from the life that radiated from every corner. A miniature Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner, decorated with paper ornaments clearly made by children's hands. Drawings and photos of beaming little faces covered the walls. Wooden toys were carefully arranged on a shelf by the kitchen. "This is," Daniel began, his voice almost reverent, "cozy." Maya grinned as she shrugged off her coat. "It's small. But it's mine. Everything here has a story." He nodded slowly, still soaking in the space. It felt more alive than any penthouse he'd ever stepped into. There was no pretense here. Just honesty. "Please, have a seat," Maya said as she moved toward the kitchen, untying her scarf. "Dinner's ready. I just need to get it out of the oven." Daniel sat at the small, round dining table. The place settings were simple but deliberate: clean plates, folded napkins, and a pair of mismatched wine glasses that somehow made the table feel even more personal. From the kitchen came the aroma of roasted chicken, fresh herbs, and something sweet, cinnamon, maybe. His stomach growled, and for the first time in weeks, he welcomed it. Maya emerged moments later with a steaming dish in hand and set it gently on the table. "Roast chicken with garlic thyme potatoes," she said. "I made it this morning, before work. I wasn't planning on company, but I always cook too much." Daniel smiled softly. "It smells incredible." They began to eat in easy silence. No small talk, no forced conversation. Just the sound of utensils tapping plates and the occasional hum of contentment from Daniel, who found himself shocked at how good the food was. Better than any Michelin-starred dish he'd had at investor dinners. Not bad for a kindergarten teacher. Maya teased. Daniel chuckled. "You underestimate yourself." "I'm used to it," she replied simply. "Most people do." He looked up, studying her expression. There was no bitterness there. No self-pity. Just quiet truth. "I don't mean to pry," he said gently, "but what made you stop for me tonight? Why take a chance on a stranger?" Maya sat back, sipping from her glass. "Because I know what loneliness feels like. I know what it's like to look around and not belong anywhere. I saw that in your eyes." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You saw right." They both fell quiet again, but this time the silence was intimate, two people slowly revealing their truths, piece by piece. "I've spent my whole life building a world that doesn't make room for people like you," Daniel said suddenly, surprising even himself. "People who feel. Who choose kindness over power." Maya tilted her head. "Why do you say that?" He hesitated. "Because in my world, vulnerability is weakness. Emotion is a liability. My family measures worth by net value and public perception." "And how do you measure it?" Maya asked. Daniel stared down at his plate. "I'm still figuring that out." Maya nodded slowly. "Then maybe tonight is a good place to start." Just then, her old radio crackled softly to life, playing an instrumental version of "Silent Night." The song filled the little space with a gentle peace, wrapping around them like a blanket. "May I ask you something?" Daniel said, looking up. "Anything," Maya replied. He hesitated for a beat. "What do you believe in?" She smiled. "I believe in people. That everyone has a spark inside them, waiting for someone to see it." Daniel didn't speak. He couldn't. Her words cut straight through his guarded exterior. He didn't know it yet, but this dinner, this quiet, unassuming meal in a tiny Brooklyn apartment, was already changing him. And in a city filled with noise, expectations, and walls built from fear and pride, two strangers had found something rare: connection. But outside, in the icy blackness just beyond Maya's frosted window, something else watched. Vincent Harrison leaned against the sleek black car parked across the street. His eyes burned with something colder than the December wind. He had followed them. And he had seen enough. He reached into his coat, pulled out his phone, and snapped several photos through a long lens, capturing Daniel inside Maya's apartment, smiling like a man who belonged there. Photos that, in the wrong hands, would spark a firestorm in the Harrison empire. Vincent's lips curled into a cold, calculating smile. "Let's see how long this fairy tale lasts," he whispered. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, and quietly disappeared into the night, leaving behind a chill far more dangerous than snow. The next morning, Daniel woke in a haze of unfamiliar peace. He'd fallen asleep on Maya's couch, fully clothed, his coat draped over him like a blanket. The soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains, warming the room in muted gold. For a moment, he forgot who he was supposed to be. No board meetings. No market concerns. No obligations to keep the Harrison name pristine. Just warmth. Just Maya. From the kitchen came the quiet clinking of dishes. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air like a whispered invitation. Daniel sat up, rubbed his eyes, and followed the sound. Maya stood by the stove in a worn New York public school sweatshirt and pajama pants dotted with snowflakes. Her curly hair was tied up messily, a few strands falling loose around her glowing face. "Good morning," she said softly, handing him a mug. "Morning," Daniel replied, accepting the cup like it was sacred. "Did I overstay?" She shook her head. "You needed rest. And you didn't snore, so you're welcome back anytime." Daniel laughed, a real, unfiltered laugh that caught him off guard. It felt strange to laugh like that. Healing, even. But the lightness didn't last long. His phone, silent all night, suddenly vibrated on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a name that instantly soured his mood, Vincent. He ignored it. But the buzzing persisted. Call after call. Finally, with a sigh, Daniel excused himself and stepped into the hallway. He answered. "What?" he snapped. "Good morning, little brother," Vincent's voice oozed with poison. "I trust you had a cozy night." Daniel froze. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the little dinner party in Brooklyn. Charming place. You looked so domesticated." Daniel's heart sank. "You followed me?" "I'm protecting you," Vincent replied coldly. "From yourself. From making the biggest mistake of your life." "It's none of your business," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice even. "Maya is none of your business. She is now. Because you've made her one. And you know how this family works, Daniel. We don't bring in outsiders." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Dad already has the photos," Vincent added. "Mom, too. I'm sure you can imagine their reaction." Daniel said nothing. He couldn't. His mind was racing, his hands shaking. "We have a meeting tonight. Family only. I suggest you come prepared to make a choice." Vincent hung up. Daniel stood frozen in the hallway, the buzz of the city beyond the windows growing louder, more menacing. He walked back into the apartment. Maya was placing plates on the table, pancakes with berries, eggs, and toast, her eyes full of quiet joy. But the moment she saw his face, her smile faltered. "What happened?" she asked gently. Daniel sat down, hands trembling slightly. "They know." Maya didn't flinch. "Your family." He nodded. "Vincent. He followed me. Took photos." Maya lowered her gaze. "I figured this might happen." "I'm so sorry, Maya," Daniel whispered. "They're not like you. They don't see people. Just threats. Numbers. You'll be under scrutiny. They'll try to ruin you. All because I." "Stop," Maya said, her voice firm but calm. "This isn't your fault. I knew who you were. And I knew what might come." She reached across the table and took his hand. "But I won't run. Not from them. Not from you." Her words hit Daniel like a lightning strike, because no one had ever chosen to stand beside him before. Not without conditions. Not without leverage. Just, for him. "I have to go see them tonight," he said quietly. "They'll give me an ultimatum." "I know it." Maya nodded. "Then you'll go. And you'll do what you believe is right." "I'm afraid of what they'll do to you," he admitted. She smiled gently. "Daniel, I've lived through worse than their threats. What I fear more is you living a lie. Let them come. I'm not afraid of storms." Later that evening, the Harrison mansion looked exactly like Daniel remembered, grand, pristine, and soulless. He walked through its massive front doors with slow, determined steps. His heart beat like a war drum in his chest. In the parlor, Vincent sat smugly beside their parents. Mr. Harrison stood with arms folded, his expression carved in stone. Mrs. Harrison sat elegantly on the velvet couch, her mouth pressed in a tight line, pearl necklace gleaming against her collarbone. "Daniel," his father began, "we've reviewed the situation." "Situation?" Daniel said coldly. "You mean the woman I care about?" Vincent interrupted with a mock sigh. "This isn't about romance. It's about optics. About alliances. You represent the Harrison name." Daniel met his brother's glare. "I represent myself." Mrs. Harrison interjected. "You're being irrational. This woman will drag our reputation into the gutter. She doesn't belong in our world." "Maybe your world doesn't deserve her," Daniel said, voice rising. Silence. Mr. Harrison's jaw tightened. "Is that your final position?" Daniel stood tall, defiant. "Maya is the most sincere, brilliant, compassionate person I've ever met. She's grounded. She's real. Everything this house is not." "We're prepared to revoke your trust," Vincent warned. "You'll lose your shares. Your title. Everything." Daniel looked each of them in the eye, then said with unwavering calm. "Then take it." And with that, he walked out of the house, leaving behind everything, wealth, status, legacy, for something far rarer, truth. The cold hit harder than expected as Daniel stepped outside the Harrison mansion. But this time, the winter air didn't bite, it braced him. He'd just walked away from everything he was born into, wealth, comfort, power. He had no plan, no safety net. But he had clarity. And for the first time in his life, he felt free. His phone vibrated in his pocket as he stood under the glow of the street lamp. A message from Vincent flashed across the screen. "You'll regret this, little brother." Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he caught a cab, eyes fixed on the blur of city lights through the frosted window. He didn't know what came next. He only knew he needed to see Maya. To tell her that he had chosen her, not out of rebellion, but because she was the only person who had ever looked at him and seen a human being, not a brand, not a balance sheet. By the time he reached her apartment, snow had begun to fall again, light and slow. He climbed the steps and knocked gently. A moment passed. Then the door opened. Maya stood there, barefoot in leggings and a sweater, eyes wide with concern. "Daniel?" He nodded slowly. "It's done." She stepped aside, letting him in. "Tell me everything." He paced the room for a moment before finally facing her. "They gave me a choice. You or the Empire. And I walked away from all of it." Maya's lips parted, breath catching. "You walked away. For you. For me. For the life I want. One where love doesn't come with a cost." His voice was firm, but his eyes were unsure. "I don't know what comes next. I don't have a plan." Maya reached out, took his hand, and pulled him to sit on the couch beside her. "You don't need a plan tonight. You just need to breathe." They sat in silence for a while, watching snowflakes drift past the window. The room was quiet, but neither of them felt alone. The quiet was safe now, peaceful, not hollow. Eventually, Daniel broke the silence. "I've never made a real choice for myself before. Every decision I ever made was designed to meet their expectations. Even becoming CEO, it wasn't about passion. It was duty. Image." Maya looked at him, her gaze soft. "But this was your choice." He nodded. "And I chose love." A tear slid down Maya's cheek. "You don't know what that means to me, Daniel. All my life, I've seen people talk about love, but run from the first sign of sacrifice. You didn't run." "I couldn't," he whispered. "Because I'd finally found something worth standing for." The days that followed were a blur. The tabloids exploded with headlines. Daniel Harrison renounces Harrison Tech in shocking move. Mystery woman behind CEO's sudden exit revealed. Vincent did everything he could to smear Maya's name, leaking her past, misrepresenting her intentions, even trying to have her investigated for false claims. But the truth had its own gravity. And public sympathy, unexpectedly, began to sway toward Daniel and Maya. People were tired of polished lies. They were hungry for something real. And the truth was this: a wealthy man had chosen love over power, and the woman he chose had never once asked him to. A week later, as Christmas lights still glowed across the city, Daniel met with his closest confidant from the company, Simon Tran, Harrison Tech CTO. "You really going through with this?" Simon asked over coffee. Daniel nodded. "Vincent and my parents can have the company. Let them rot in their tower. I'm building something new." Simon leaned forward. "You're serious?" "I want to create something that actually helps people. Education. Equity. Maybe even give kids like Maya's students better futures." Simon smiled. "Then I'm in. Just say the word." Word spread fast. Within weeks, investors, real visionaries, not legacy sharks, began reaching out to Daniel. They didn't want more tech giants. They wanted change. And Daniel was ready to lead that charge, with Maya by his side. One snowy evening, Daniel and Maya walked through Prospect Park, wrapped in scarves and laughter. Children raced by, throwing snowballs, their joy echoing through the trees. "I used to come here after class," Maya said, smiling. "It's where I cleared my head." Daniel watched her. "It's where I found mine." She looked at him, a question in her eyes. "I've been thinking," he said, stopping beneath a lamppost. "About everything we've built since that night." She nodded. "So have I. I lost my title, my legacy, my reputation," Daniel said, voice soft. "But I gained you. And I gained a life that means something." He pulled a small box from his coat pocket. Maya's breath caught. Daniel opened it, revealing a delicate silver ring set with a sapphire, her birthstone. "Will you continue walking this uncertain road with me, Maya Mitchell?" She stared at him, tears already falling. "Daniel Harrison, you beautiful fool, yes. 1,000 times yes." They kissed beneath the falling snow, surrounded by laughter, children, and light, finally free of the cold that had ruled their hearts for too long. But not everyone was ready to let go. Across the city, in a penthouse office, Vincent Harrison watched the proposal video circulate online, his jaw tight with fury. The comments were flooded with love and praise. "This is what real leadership looks like. They give me hope in humanity again." Vincent turned from the screen, dialing a number. "We need to move. If we don't stop him now, everything we've built will collapse." The voice on the other end responded, calm but firm. "What do you propose?" Vincent's eyes darkened. "I propose we remind Daniel that love can be broken. Just like trust." And so, just as Daniel and Maya finally found peace, a new storm, colder and more dangerous than before, began to gather. The new year arrived with a whisper and a warning. Snow still blanketed the streets of New York, but the warmth in Daniel and Maya's lives only grew. They now lived together in Maya's small apartment, still modest, still filled with joy, but now pulsing with a shared heartbeat. The world had slowly started to accept their story, some seeing Daniel's sacrifice as courageous, others calling it foolish. But to the two of them, none of that mattered. They had each other. That was the whole world. Daniel had begun laying the groundwork for his new company, one built not on profit alone, but on purpose. Maya spent her days teaching, her evenings curled beside him on the couch, working on lesson plans or laughing at whatever documentary he insisted on watching that week. Then one afternoon, the storm hit. It began with a knock. Daniel opened the door to a man in a sharp gray suit, flanked by another holding a manila envelope. "Mr. Harrison?" the first man asked. "Yes. You've been served." The envelope was thrust into his chest, and the two men turned and left without another word. Maya looked up from the kitchen, alarmed. "What is it?" Daniel opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, a cease and desist, a lawsuit, and a public statement drafted by Harrison Tech's lawyers accusing Daniel of stealing proprietary information to start his new company. The claims were false, completely manufactured, but written in a way that would appear believable to the public. Maya came over, reading beside him. Her expression turned to horror. "They're trying to ruin your credibility." Daniel sat down slowly, his breath shallow. "They knew exactly how to strike." "Vincent," Maya whispered. He nodded. "This is his play. If he can't scare me through family, he'll do it through reputation." Later that night, a news article surfaced. Then another. And another. Daniel's name trended online for all the wrong reasons. Fallen CEO now under legal fire. New startup tied to stolen IP. Harrison family implosion continues. They all painted Daniel as unstable. A betrayer. A desperate man clinging to relevance through manipulation. Daniel's phone buzzed constantly, calls from journalists, former colleagues, and friends he hadn't heard from in years. Many wanted dirt. Others just wanted a statement. Simon called, his voice anxious. "Daniel, they're serious. They're trying to shut you down before you even launch." "I know," Daniel said. "But I'm not going to roll over." Simon lowered his voice. "I have to ask, did you take anything from Harrison Tech?" Daniel stood, voice cold. "You really have to ask." "No, I had to. Legally. I'm with you, Daniel. Always. But this is war." Maya hung up the call and looked at Daniel. "We're going to fight this. But we have to be smart." That evening, the two sat side by side, working through every document, every line of legal jargon. Maya's calm presence was his anchor, keeping him from unraveling. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" Daniel muttered. "Because they're afraid of us," Maya said. "You made them irrelevant the moment you walked away." Then came the knock that froze them both. A second envelope, this one addressed to Maya. Daniel opened it with her, his gut already twisting. It was worse than they imagined. Vincent had dug into Maya's past, her father's old criminal record, her mother's history of bankruptcy, her college records. All of it was now presented in a vile document designed to shame her. There was even a threat of public exposure. If she didn't persuade Daniel to walk away from his startup, her background would be released to the press. Maya's hands trembled. "He wants me to leave you." Daniel grabbed the papers, fury rising in his throat. "This is low. Even for him." Maya was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, she stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the falling snow. "This is exactly what he wants. Fear. Doubt." Daniel crossed to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We're not giving in." "I know," Maya whispered. "But this won't stop. Not until we show him we're stronger." Daniel nodded. "Then let's make it public." She turned. "You mean?" "Yes. An interview. Together. No PR firm. No corporate spin. Just us. Raw, real, honest." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "If that's what it takes." The next morning, Daniel reached out to a trusted journalist, Maria Lenz, a woman known for exposing corruption without bowing to corporate power. She agreed immediately. When the interview aired 3 nights later, it shattered expectations. Daniel sat beside Maya on a simple couch. No suits. No handlers. "I walked away from billions," Daniel said, not because I was weak, but because I finally found something worth fighting for. Maya spoke next. Calm, unwavering. I grew up in a system that said people like me don't belong. But Daniel never saw me as less. He saw me. That's why they're trying to destroy us, because love like this scares them. By the end of the 40-minute segment, social media had exploded with support. Hashtag stand with Daniel. Hashtag protect Maya. Hashtag truth over power. Donations poured into Daniel's new startup. Volunteers offered time. Educators backed Maya. And a wave of ordinary people, from all walks of life, stood up and said, "We see you." But the victory wasn't without its price. Vincent, watching the interview in his penthouse, didn't shout. He didn't scream. He simply whispered. Time for the final move. He picked up his phone and called a contact in Washington. "I need a full audit on Daniel Harrison. Every dime, every detail. Tear him apart." He ended the call and looked out over the city. This isn't over. And he was right. Because Daniel and Maya were about to face their greatest test yet. A week after the interview aired, Daniel and Maya found themselves surrounded by an overwhelming outpouring of support. Their story had gone viral, millions watched the clip, wrote messages of encouragement, and even started calling them the couple that challenged power. But the higher they rose, the more vicious the attacks from the Harrison family became. Vincent's final move had arrived, silent, sharp, and utterly ruthless. The first sign came when Daniel received a call from his bank. "We're conducting an internal review of your accounts, Mr. Harrison. Due to recent allegations and a federal audit request, we are freezing all personal and business assets until further notice." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. "My company's funds are in that account. My staff payroll. Our development team. We understand, sir. But our hands are tied." He hung up, heart racing. Maya, noticing the panic in his eyes, stood from the table. "What is it?" "They froze everything," he whispered. "Vincent called for a federal audit. And he got it." Maya didn't flinch. "We'll find a way through this. We always do." But she wasn't prepared for what came next. That afternoon, she was called into her school's administrative office. Her principal, usually warm and encouraging, looked tense, papers spread across his desk. "Maya. I need to tell you something. We've received a formal complaint, anonymous, but detailed." Maya blinked. "Complaint?" He handed her a printed letter. It included screenshots of old social media posts, photos of her and Daniel, and even a comment she'd made years ago on racial inequality in education, taken entirely out of context. "They're claiming you're using your classroom to spread personal political beliefs. That you're unfit to teach." Maya's breath hitched. "This is a smear campaign." "I believe you," the principal said gently. "But the school board is launching an investigation. You'll be placed on temporary leave while it's resolved." Tears welled in her eyes. "They're trying to erase me." "I know," he said. "I'm so sorry." Maya walked home in a daze. She found Daniel pacing the apartment, the air thick with tension. She held up the letter. "They suspended me." Daniel stepped forward. "No. No, this is too far. They don't want to destroy your company anymore," she said softly. "They want to break us." That night, they sat in silence, two people stripped of their titles, wealth, even their right to serve. But in that silence, something deeper emerged. Daniel finally spoke. "I don't care if they burn it all down. I would still choose you. 100 times. Maya looked up at him through tears. "And I would still say yes." He pulled her close, and they stayed like that for hours, hearts pressed together, steadying each other against a storm engineered to ruin them. But they weren't the only ones watching the destruction unfold. Thousands of people, former clients, educators, journalists, and everyday citizens, had followed their story. When the news of Maya's suspension hit social media, it ignited a firestorm. Hashtag reinstate Maya. Hashtag stop the Harrisons. Hashtag love is not a crime. Protests broke out in front of the Harrison Tech headquarters. Signs that read, "Let Daniel build," and "Justice for Maya," were hoisted by people who had never met them, but believed in what they stood for. Then came the tipping point. An investigative journalist named Tessa Rowe, who'd been quietly following the Harrison family for years, contacted Daniel. "I have something you need to see," she said. They met at a quiet cafe in Lower Manhattan. Tessa slid a flash drive across the table. "I've been tracking Vincent's shell companies, offshore accounts, private dealings. Your audit. It's a distraction. But I found something worse." Daniel plugged in the drive that night. What he saw left him speechless. Bribes. Tax fraud. Board manipulation. Vincent had cooked the books at Harrison Tech for years, and the proof was irrefutable. He looked at Maya. "If we release this, he goes down. And maybe my parents, too." She met his gaze. "Are you ready for that?" Daniel hesitated. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. But it also meant turning against the family name that had shaped him, even if that name never truly loved him back. He took Maya's hand. "Let's do it. Together." The next morning, they forwarded the files to the federal authorities and an independent watchdog. The fallout was swift. Vincent was arrested 2 days later on charges of fraud, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. Photos of him being led out of his penthouse in handcuffs were splashed across every screen. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison were forced to resign from all boards. Investigations into their financial entanglements were launched almost immediately. Daniel received a call from the bank. His accounts were reinstated. The audit dropped. The case dismissed. Maya's school board reversed the suspension after public outcry and a personal letter from the mayor. By the end of the week, everything Vincent had built through deception had crumbled, and everything Daniel and Maya had built on truth stood stronger than ever. But the victory didn't make them gloat. It made them breathe. On a quiet evening, they returned to the same bench in the park where it had all begun. Maya leaned against Daniel, her head resting on his shoulder. "This place feels different now." He nodded. "That night, I was lost. Now, I'm found." She smiled. "By me." He chuckled. "Yes. You found me. And I'll never let you get lost again." They sat there as snow fell gently around them, two hearts that had survived the worst, and found something no amount of power could ever buy. Real love. 1 year had passed since that snowy Christmas Eve when a soft voice asked a powerful man if he'd like to have dinner. And in that single, quiet question, an empire had crumbled, a heart had awakened, and a new life was born. Daniel Harrison, once the untouchable CEO of Harrison Tech, now stood as the founder of Lighthouse Futures, a revolutionary education tech foundation aimed at underserved schools, underfunded teachers, and children who'd always been forgotten by the system. What began with just a spark between two people had ignited a movement far greater than either of them imagined. And beside him, as always, stood Maya Mitchell, teacher, advocate, speaker, and the love of his life. The Harrison name, once only associated with power and elitism, had been redefined by Daniel's bravery. Though his parents had retreated from public life after the fall of their company, and Vincent now awaited sentencing, Daniel carried no glee about their downfall. Only closure. He had never wanted revenge. He had only ever wanted to be free. Now, on another Christmas Eve, Maya stood in a white, off-the-shoulder dress in the heart of a beautifully lit event hall in Brooklyn. The room was filled with guests, students from her school, fellow teachers, local leaders, and countless supporters from across the country who had followed their story. This wasn't a gala for billionaires or political elites, it was a celebration of love, resilience, and change. Daniel stood beside her in a simple black suit, no tie. Just the way Maya liked him, real, not polished. Not hidden. The room grew quiet as Maya took the microphone. She looked out across the faces before her, then at Daniel. "A year ago," she began, her voice strong and steady, "I asked a stranger sitting alone on a bench if he wanted to have dinner with me." Laughter rippled through the crowd, some wiping tears before they even began. "I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his title or his wealth. I just saw someone who looked like he needed kindness. What I didn't expect, was that kindness would change my life too." She turned to Daniel. "You lost everything for me. But you gave me everything in return. Love. Respect. Partnership. And the courage to fight for what matters." Daniel stepped forward and took the microphone, his other hand never leaving hers. "I didn't lose anything," he said. "I gave up a life built on walls I never wanted. And I gained a world I never dreamed could be mine. Because you, Maya, you showed me that I could be loved for who I really am. Not for my last name. Not for my net worth. But for my soul." The room erupted into thunderous applause. And then, just as he had been waiting to do for months, Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a velvet box. Slowly, he sank to one knee. Gasps filled the room. "I asked you once if you'd walk this road with me," Daniel said. "But tonight, I want to ask again, this time for forever." He opened the box to reveal a diamond ring, elegant and modest, shining with the same quiet brilliance as the woman before him. "Maya Mitchell, will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks as she nodded, words caught in her throat. "Yes," she whispered, barely able to breathe. "Yes. 1,000,000 times yes." The crowd roared. Confetti floated down. And as Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya kissed him like nothing else in the world mattered, because, in that moment, nothing else did. Later that night, as the guests celebrated around them and music filled the air, Maya pulled Daniel aside and whispered. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "You still haven't told me what you were thinking that first night when I walked up to you." Daniel laughed. "I was thinking I was hallucinating. That no one that beautiful could possibly be talking to me." Maya grinned. "Well, lucky for you, I was." He held her close. "And lucky for me, you always will be." Outside, snow began to fall again, just as it had 1 year ago. But this time, the chill held no power over them. Their hearts were warm. Their future secure. Because when the world told them to let go, they held tighter. When wealth and legacy tried to tear them apart, they stayed together. And when love was tested by fire, they didn't just survive. They triumphed. Sometimes, all it takes is one question to change a life. "Would you like to have dinner with me?" Daniel and Maya's story reminds us that love isn't found in penthouses, inheritances, or reputation, but in the courage to reach out, and the strength to hold on when everything tries to pull you apart. Power fades. Fortune shifts. But love, the kind born in truth, endures everything. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and share your favorite moment. Would you have risked it all for love like Daniel? Would you have stood by someone like Maya? Please like, subscribe to True Echo, and share this video with someone who believes in love that defies the odds. We'll be back soon with more real, emotional, and powerful stories that echo through the heart. Happy holidays, and remember. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness is the start of everything.